What's going on, guys? My name is Wade with TechDaily. So when Apple released the new 10th generation iPad, people had some rough things to say, calling it the strangest, the weirdest, the worst iPad, and essentially saying that no one should buy it. Now, I'm not one to skip out on an Apple bashing extravaganza like that, so I forked over $449 myself for this thing, and spoiler alert, everyone was right. The 10th generation iPad isn't actually bad by itself. It's a mostly fine iPad. Adding some accessories makes it bad though, we'll get into that, but it's actually just that Apple's entire lineup of iPads is bad. It's so confusing, there are so many iPads now, and in releasing this one, they had to sort of take different elements from different iPads and attempt to fill a product gap that doesn't really exist. The 10th gen iPad isn't the cheapest iPad, it isn't the smallest iPad or the biggest, it isn't the most powerful or even the least powerful. It isn't unique in any way, it just sort of exists, I think, to give people some regular standard iPad, since every other iPad has some defining characteristic like Pro or Air or Mini. But it also isn't even the only regular iPad that Apple still sells. So in this video, I'm going to reiterate why the 10th gen iPad is such a strange device, at least from my own perspective. And I'm also going to hopefully clear up some confusion with Apple's current iPad lineup so that you could maybe make the right decision if you're looking for one this holiday season or at any other time in the near future. The TLDR is just that if you're going to use this iPad as just like a big iOS device, to pair with your favorite apps, to watch content, to use it on its own, it's probably fine, but if you're gonna bring in any other accessories, that's where this iPad really falls apart. Now, there is one product I would highly recommend any and all iPad users get, and that's Paperlike, who are kind enough to sponsor this video. Paperlike is an iPad screen protector like no other. Not only does it protect your device, but it also transforms the look and feel of the display itself. It's designed to give professionals and artists an emulated paper-like feel as you draw or write with a stylus or Apple Pencil. Rather than fighting against a smudged up glossy glass screen, you're instead gliding across this soft matte finish with a subtle texture that allows for a smoother and more precise writing and drawing experience. And it really does make a difference. It's also just a great screen protector itself that enhances the viewing experience. It reduces glare to almost zero, you won't see any fingerprints or smudges, and Paperlike has some other cool accessories like a pair of Apple Pencil grips to further help enhance your writing, and this little cleaning kit. It's a spray bottle wrapped in microfiber so you can spray and wipe away the dust or dirt on any of your tech. So if you're big into the writing and drawing elements of the iPad or just want a better screen protector, I highly recommend checking out Paperlike at the link in the video description, and thanks so much again to Paperlike for sponsoring this video. Okay, so first things first. In considering the new 10th gen iPad, we first need to see where it fits within Apple's lineup, and this is where the confusion begins. The 10th gen iPad is just called iPad, but when you're browsing Apple's online store, you'll see that there's actually two iPads just called iPad. Apple still sells the 9th gen iPad for some reason and still highlights it, but honestly, even for $329, I think the 9th gen iPad is just too dated now to consider, unless you specifically and only want something with a home button. So in my mind, that's off the table. From here, what's sort of interesting is that it would appear the iPad mini should be less expensive than this larger 10th gen iPad, but it's actually not. The smaller iPad mini, which launched a year ago, is $50 more than the new 10th gen iPad. And that's because the iPad mini is better than the 10th gen iPad spec-wise. It has the A15 Bionic processor, a laminated display, Apple Pencil 2 support. The 10th gen iPad doesn't have any of that stuff. So that to me makes no sense, and I guess we're starting to get a little nitpicky here, but you can start to see why this 10th gen iPad is so weird. Fortunately, the rest of the higher tier iPads make sense from here. The iPad Air, the next step up, is better across the board, and honestly, for a starter iPad, I know it's $150 more, but it is significantly better, so that would be my pick. And the iPad Pros are obviously in an entirely different league. But let's now take a closer look at the quirks and features of this 10th gen iPad, because everything from the design to the accessory support is also beyond confusing. So physically, the 10.9-inch form factor of the 10th gen iPad isn't anything new. The size and design has been used and reused for multiple iPads before. It's actually the intended orientation that's the confusing bit. For years and years, lesser iPads have been shown upright in portrait orientation. The FaceTime camera is on the short edge. That's how the iPad mini and iPad Air are designed anyway, but with this 10th gen iPad, Apple seems like they didn't really know which way they wanted you to use it. The power button, which is also Touch ID, is at what would be the top right, and the volume buttons are along the right side, like an iPhone. But everything else on this iPad leads me to believe that you should be using it landscape. The most obvious justification for that is the new placement of the selfie camera. It's been moved to the long edge of the iPad, however you want to define that. And you obviously have quad speakers on the short sides that allow for some great surround sound listening and solid hand placement too in this orientation. Now, a lot of people love this change, since video calls may look more professional now with a sideways iPad. But I don't know, it just feels a little weird on a regular budget iPad like this one now, especially since everything else on the back of the iPad, like the logo and the text, all still suggests that portrait or upright is the proper orientation. The real pain and suffering comes out when you start considering buying some of the accessories with this iPad. Now, if you want an Apple Pencil, this 10th gen iPad only supports the first gen Apple Pencil. That's not necessarily a bad thing by itself, but what I forgot to mention is that the 10th gen iPad is now USB-C, not Lightning. The first gen Apple Pencil is Lightning, so in order to pair up the Apple Pencil to this iPad, you either need to make sure you buy a current new first gen Apple Pencil that now includes the Lightning to USB-C dongles, or you'll need to buy the USB-C to Apple Pencil dongle separately for $9, and then use a USB-C cable to jerry-rig the whole contraption altogether. This is an awful solution to a problem that just should not exist. Plugging the Apple Pencil directly into the iPad or connecting it to the side of the iPad was always a strange but at least practical and straightforward way to pair and charge it. But relying on this setup to do the same thing, and also probably further inconveniencing new iPad users with USB-C in general, is absolutely the wrong approach. The reason why this iPad doesn't support the second gen Apple Pencil is probably due in part to the non-laminated display. The 10th gen iPad has the display technology of some 5 or 6 years ago, and while it is a perfectly nice liquid retina IPS LCD panel, it has that big old gap between the glass and the digitizer and produces so much glare that it makes getting one of the higher-end iPads almost justified for this reason alone. And yes, I know there needs to be some separation between these lesser iPads and the higher-end ones, but at what cost? Inconveniencing a regular iPad user so much that they just feel beaten and taken advantage of with dongles and stipulations and limitations? I don't think that's the answer. The other accessory woe is with the Magic Keyboard Folio that's available for this iPad. It's new, it's specific to this 10th gen iPad for starters, and it retails for $249. That's more than half the price of the iPad itself. I could not justify that, so that's why I didn't buy one. And aside from it being ridiculously overpriced, even for Apple, it isn't even backlit. And there's actually a number of third-party keyboards out now for this iPad, so look into those instead. This keyboard just has no redeeming qualities whatsoever. Now, the icing on the weirdness cake that is the 10th gen iPad is actually performance. I alluded to this earlier, but this brand new 2022 iPad is powered by Apple's A14 Bionic processor, the one from 2 years ago that came on the iPhone 12s. Now, I'm not suggesting that performance on this iPad is bad. It's a full-fledged, full-featured, and plenty powerful iPad OS device, but putting in 2-year-old components into a new product and charging more money than what previous regular iPads retailed for seems like another bad move. You can't really say that this iPad is any better, faster, or more powerful than before because it's really not. I guess it's technically better than the 9th gen iPad since it's 1 year newer of a processor. So it's not the worst in the lineup, but it's pretty close. And you're buying something that's technically already 2 years behind. Does that mean we'll see 2 years less iPadOS software support? Perhaps. That's one of the first things that came to my mind, at least, and it leads me to believe that this 10th gen iPad maybe isn't that long-term investment that most other Apple products tend to be. But I guess only time will tell if that ends up being the case. All in all, I really hate to jump on the hater bandwagon, but this 10th gen iPad just doesn't seem like it makes a whole lot of sense. It's expensive, but not any better than previous years, really. It's inconvenient if you want to use the Apple Pencil. The keyboard is overpriced. The specs are a lot less than they should be. Is it still an iPad? Yes, absolutely. If you want it, should you still buy it? Sure, I can't stop you. But if you have the extra money and you want an iPad that makes sense, especially to pair with the accessories and actually feel like you have something good and up to date that will last you 5, 6, 7 more years at least, the iPad Air is probably where you should start. This 10th gen iPad is a weird and confusing, not so entry-level iPad that I just don't really understand. So there you go. Those are my thoughts on this 10th gen iPad. What do you guys think? Am I being too critical? Let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, of course. Hopefully you guys did enjoy this video though. Be sure to follow TechDaily on Twitter and subscribe to the TechDaily YouTube channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys later.